Okay. Why don't you just give me a baseline in the back there while I'm going to do this recruiting update. Penn State on the board for official visits. Finally, if you watched the video with Ryan Snyder yesterday, Daryus Disxon, cornerback from California, hopped on board. This was one of those ones where, we got in the background music there. Okay. This was one of those ones that Penn State felt really good about coming out of the weekend. First visit from the left coast. That's a long way to go for a first visit. Turn around and commit. Very good offer list. We have him a little bit lower on 3 than the industry rankings. Industry ranking 135, number 14 cornerback. We have him as a high 3-star prospect, number 29 cornerback. Of course, going to get questions about that. I think the long speed here is the big question.
Yep.
He went 11.5 in the 100 as a sophomore, so not this past year. I didn't find anything from this past year. So I think that's going to ding him in terms of like long-term projection. But you put on the tape, he plays man pretty well. I believe T. Frank, we had a 4.31 shuttle on him, which
yes.
kind of. It doesn't erase all the down on the speed, but that's pretty good for a guy that's 6 foot plus. One of those longer corners that Terry Smith has gone after, will continue to go after, and I feel like they're in a good spot for another long corner coming out of the weekend, and Josh Johnson as well. So you look for that to continue. But yeah, there's another one, a highly regarded kid from a top program in California. It's going to be one of those ones that you ride all the way to signing day just for logistical purposes here. I mean, that's a long way to go from home, but he came this weekend. He was blown away by Penn State's approach. Really likes Terry Smith, and this has been one of those recruitments where he really paid attention to the ones that paid attention to him. He went to Washington for an official visit. He had a Tennessee official visit scheduled. Those were kind of the top 3. But yeah, he moves on the football very well. If you're watching the YouTube show, had 3 picks this year, was involved, and that's an advanced program right there. I mean, Modern Day is one of a top 10 program in the country. So for him to start and excel at that program is a good sign. It's again, I'm just going to keep saying it's a long way from home, but he's a guy that Penn State's liked for a long time. Was kind of one of those outsiders coming into the weekend as a California kid. You never know how that visit's going to take, and it took well.
Can I jump in here on something? I did some work last night. Of course, you can check out our breaking news video, get Ryan Snyder's impressions of everything. And of course, some of that film evaluation I did yesterday based off what we saw in the highlight film. I did go and I watched some full game film, worked through about a half of Don Bosco prep and Modern Day. And he played slot corner. So, filling in the gaps of what you mentioned of a 3-star versus a 4-star elsewhere, I think certain programs, if by the end of the season you're playing slot, and it was primarily slot where he did have some outside reps, but it was because the offense motioned him into those situations, that is just another piece to describe the prospect. And again, I think a lot of people take all of these as a negative, and I don't think it's negative as much as it is a descriptive situation about what Daryus Disxon was asked to do at his high school.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I haven't watched the full game stuff, but versatility is certainly there. I'm curious. I saw him on Friday. We had a photo gallery up from the weekend from team camp. They brought in all of these, all the official visitors in early. They were with the coaches on the golf carts, all that kind of stuff. You can check that out on blueillustrated.com. I thought he was like 6'2", but he's a shade over 6 foot. So, he's not quite as tall and long as I initially thought, but if you're over 6 foot, that's kind of the benchmark there. Actually, 5'11" is usually the actual benchmark. So I'm saying, when I say he's over 6 foot, I mean legitimately, if he's not wearing shoes, he's over 6 foot. That's a good start. He's got some length. I don't think he's got Joey Porter length, but he's got some length to him. And there's certainly something to work with there. And again, we just keep going back to it. Terry Smith knows what he's doing, man. He's you can't hit 1,000 on everyone, but Terry Smith has done a pretty good job of getting his guys in. I mean, they've got 6 guys that are going to play this year. 8 guys that maybe could play this year with the freshmen. That's a pretty good spot to be in. So yeah, I'm curious how this continues to go, because you've got Josh Johnson, who was in this weekend. Of course, at the top of the board, Brandon Finney and Jameer Joseph. Joseph will come in for an official visit this weekend. Terry will take them all if he wants to. Like, that's kind of how we've talked about this.
And they don't all have to be Terry's, right? Eventually, like, they've added, essentially, if we talk about the long-term projection, you mentioned Josh Johnson and Daryus Disxon. All of these guys that we're talking about, maybe not all of them, but a couple of these guys we have talking about position versatility, where they tackle so well. They're so aggressive that if the competition meets out that they don't play outside corner, they're still starting and very valuable roles in this defense, and getting a lot of different body types and skill sets, I think, is really smart at that cornerback position, because you can always move inward. You can't always move outward.
Yeah, and you can maybe throw Joseph in that category as well. Like Notre Dame's recruiting him as a safety right now, so because
Gotcha.
I think they're kind of full up at corner. So it is a situation where you've got to trust what he's doing, but you've seen the body of work where you're able to do that. And on top of that, I mean, we've seen with a guy like AJ Harris that Big Ten corner is a bit different. Like this is a situation where you can put your more fleet safety at corner, and that's something that could work.
What else came up from this past weekend?
All these comments about you. That's basically what's came up this weekend. I mentioned Josh Johnson. I think Penn State's also in a good spot with Jeff Exenor, the receiver from McDonough. This is not a surprise. This is a guy we've been talking about for a while, but I'll be honest with you, it's been closer than you would think. You've got a McDonough kid. You've got a guy that's been on campus a ton. He's got connections to Kenny Sanders, got connections to the Penn State staff, players that are here. I specifically went out of my way not to ask him about the pipeline. He was grateful for that. But I think you separate that, and I think Penn State's still number one for Jeff Exner. I think it's a decent lead. He still wants to check out Maryland. I think it's kind of come down to Maryland, Virginia Tech, and Penn State, which is actually the same three that Matthew Otten has in there as well. So that's an interesting. I think we can maybe start to see that run on receivers. Lex Cyrus went to South Carolina this weekend. Probably going to turn around and make a decision very soon. Jeff Exner wants to get to July. I don't know that that's he's going to have that luxury. And I think it's not just an Exner thing. I think that's what you see from a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys want to get to July. A lot of these coaches want to get it locked down before that. But also Matthew Otten's in there. They got a couple of receivers still slated for next weekend as well. So I think we're about to maybe see that run on receivers that we've kind of been hoping for the better part of a year.
Yeah. Another thing that happened, we talk about official visits, but these things aren't all in a vacuum. Other players are getting commits. Other players are hosting players, and they're making decisions. Two that really stung Penn State, and we'll get to this in the mailbag a little more in depth, but tackle recruiting yesterday, a big blow for Penn State. Michael Carroll, in-state 5-star potential player, commits to Alabama. Ziyare Addison, maybe the most athletic offensive lineman in the nation, commits to Oregon after their official visits this past weekend. So, how big of a blow is this? What is the situation with Penn State right now with their tackle recruiting?
Yeah, it's tough, man, because you thought that given how Michael Carroll's recruitment would go, he would at least take the last 2 visits. He's enjoyed the process to date. Alabama has got him on campus now 3 times in the last, I'd say, 2 months, and really blew him away. And that's it's tough to stomach. And you look at it and you say Alabama, that makes sense. But at the same time, that's a Pennsylvania kid, a Penn State legacy, a guy that you've had as a top target for a long, long time. And that's a tough one to stomach, because if you look at the Pennsylvania rankings right now, Penn State not doing that great. That great. They've got some guys to close on, but at the same time, Michael Carroll was a big time recruit. I didn't want to do like a number 1 overall type thing, but he was right in the mix for that number 1 overall recruit.
It's tough not to see him that way. I mean, he's a special offensive lineman from a complete standpoint. You know, they've gotten some really talented players lately, but I don't think any of them had the size, speed, athleticism combination, the confidence you felt about him projecting to the next level the way Carroll had.
Yeah, and I think if you look at his recruitment, Penn State is not a situation where they drug their feet. I think there was maybe a perception on his end that they should have offered earlier, but at the same time, he was a different player when they didn't offer him. Like he was a 6'3" guard that turned into a 6'6" tackle, and you can't always see that one coming. He came to camp. He was fantastic at camp. They were, I think, we're still an early offer, and it's kind of funny because you hear that, and we've heard that with a few kids, especially in this cycle, that maybe were slighted that they weren't the first offer from Penn State or something like that. But then the school that they eventually committed to offered after. I don't know, man. Some of this stuff just doesn't make sense. I'm going to caught myself there. Some of the stuff doesn't make sense sometimes. Ziyare Addison, not a complete surprise. I mean, that's a guy that Penn State was hoping to get on campus again this weekend. He's been up a couple of times, very impressed, but Oregon that's tough to recruit against Oregon. And for a guy that has been as well traveled as him, I'm not surprised to see him go across the country. Went to UCLA, went to USC, went all the way, to Penn State a couple of times. So while it's a tough one, I'm not exactly surprised by the Ziyare Addison.
Yeah, that felt like there was a certain vibe about that recruitment that you're right, where there was a certain feel about what he was looking for, and Oregon seems like a fit with kind of the Nike and everything we talk about when there's the perception of Oregon as well. A couple of other offensive linemen that were not the top 3 committed. What's the situation there with those guys?
Yeah, you kind of find yourself in a pickle here at offensive tackle recruiting, and I think there might be a mailbag question about this, so I may be splashing that. But Malachi Goodman, and if he wasn't a big enough priority already, even bigger of a priority, because you've gone and you've kind of slow played some guys on the offensive line, maybe not all tackles, but Rowan Byrne committed to Clemson. A bit surprised by that, and Nolan Davenport committed to Wisconsin. So those are a couple of guys that you had maybe on the warming plate, and all of a sudden they're off the table too. So I'm very curious to see what Phil Troutwine is going to be able to do. Of course, Goodman is the biggest priority that's still out there, but you got to shift and go elsewhere. We saw Penn State bring in Amari Hills this weekend again he was here for an official visit, and then he was here for camp. I don't think that's going to solve your tackle problem. Problem is probably an extension here, but that's not going to solve the hole that you have at offensive tackle. So curious to see how that goes because I flat out don't have an answer for you right now.
A couple other things from this weekend that we have. Kainoa Winston visited Penn State. Andrew Olesh is a top target visiting other schools as well. And then camp. So round us out with those topics that you have here in your recruiting update.
Yeah, I think Michigan's lurking for a couple of those big time prospects that Penn State was again in early on. But Kainoa Winston was at Penn State was at Penn State over the weekend. I think Penn State impressed him, but I think that Michigan had a lead coming into it. I'd like to do a little bit more research before putting in a pick there, but it seems like Michigan seems to have weathered the storm, done a good job there. Andrew Olesh, kind of the same thing. Olesh has not been to Michigan as many times as he's been to Penn State, but I think he likes the appeal and the option of Michigan. So like Michigan ain't going away. Like I know there's a coaching change and things like that, and maybe that's a situation down the road where they lose a couple games and you might be able to circle back around. But Michigan is coming in strong off that national title.
And then camp, we have a question here in the chat about being at camp. Eric Eisler says, don't know how I miss you guys at Prospect Camp. Thanks for the awesome preview. We'll get to your question a little bit later. Eric, really appreciate your donation to the channel. But what did you see at Prospect Camp this past weekend?
Yeah, Prospect Camp was first off massive. Like that's one of the bigger ones that we've been to. I showed up, so I like to do some base work and then show up a little bit later because a lot of it's testing and then they get into position drills. I usually show up around position drills, but I walked into Haluba and I was like, wow, there's a lot of kids. And then I walked outside and there was twice as many kids. So I think 450 kids or something like that this weekend. So that was a big camp. Lots of offers went out. Some intriguing ones. I'm really intrigued by Peyton Falzone maybe a long E at the end there. But from Nazareth, he's a quarterback, but he's not a quarterback. He went out and he did the Luke Reynolds thing. He ran a 4.5. He tested extremely well, which he tested at the all 22 Elite 11 a couple weeks ago. He tested off the charts there, but he's got great size at 6'5". Kid's gonna be a tight end. Like, I don't know if he wants to hear that. I don't know if he's heard that before, but he went to Virginia Tech, picked up an offer, went to Penn State, picked up an offer. When you have that kind of athleticism and you are not quite that level at tight end, does that sound familiar? Does that sound like anybody that's on Penn State's roster, T. Frank?
Bunch of guys, honestly, like more than one.
Yeah. Tyler Warren is the one that I was looking for because Virginia Tech came through with the offer, and everybody's labeling him as a quarterback, but he's definitely carrying that athlete tab right now. They got him to work out afterward with Andy Kotelnicki, with Danny O'Brien throwing a little bit, throwing the passes to I caught myself there. Danny O'Brien wasn't throwing the passes. Brady Edmonds, the 2027 quarterback, was throwing him the passes. So giving him a little bit of look. Look, the kid's going to play high school quarterback. That's what he should do. It's going to make his team better. But at the same time, when he gets to college, he's going to be a tight end.
Hey, it's T. Frank. Did you enjoy that video? Hope you did. I can't get you another one. Actually, yes, I can. You can click on the link here in this part of the video to go to another Blue White Illustrated video. So if you liked it, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. You can also do that by clicking on this interactive link that I'm pointing vaguely to. Super helpful. Also, if you want more from Blue White Illustrated, go to bluewhiteillustrated.com and use our special promo code that you're getting right here. Subscribe for 2 months. You get it for just $1 using promo code PSU1. That's promo code PSU1 over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. You can check out the link in the description of this video to go right there. I try to make it as easy as I can. I just can't click it for you. That's the only, I can't reach over and click the buttons for you. You got to do that part.